Absolutely a speechless moment for me right now. A person who I've personally and professionally admired, respected, and followed like a stalker for last few years on Twitter and all social media platforms. I'm sitting with him. I've been following up with him for last few years to get him for one of our forums, and finally he agreed. And when it started raining a couple of days ago, I was like just hoping against hope that nothing should come in between the session and us. But thank you, sir, to be here in spite of all the odds. And you know, your story, classic story of a white-collar executive, an educated Indian growing up the ranks, both in terms of prosperity as well as thought leadership, and the widespread respect that he's earned. We have been, of course, listening to your stories about your activities after the Infosys days, and you pick up any magazine, any publication, and they rate you right up on the thought leadership bit, or as an angel investor, or as a voice when it comes to national issues or economic issues. So I definitely do not want to miss out on this opportunity to talk to you about slightly wider issues than just family offices. But sticking to the theme, let me just begin a couple of questions about how do you see this entire space of family offices coming up?
Well, I think at this stage of India's growth, we are seeing a wealth impact. There's a wealth transfer from the earlier generation to the next generation. The baby boomers, like you say in America, which happened after the war. Because remember, when we got freedom, we were just about 33 crore people. We are now 137 crore people.
Correct.
That means the generation that grew after the war, after India got freedom, and now educated the children, maybe bought a property, maybe did well, they have wealth to pass on.
Sure.
And India's GDP today is $2.7 trillion. That's quite a bit of money. So when you see India, you must look at the top 300 million people. And the 300 million people is as big as the population of the United States.
Right.
Now, they have done reasonably well in Indian terms, and they will pass on their wealth to their children. And when they pass on, how do they manage that? What do they do is a big question they have to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are traditional businesses which have grown the business, educated the children overseas, and possibly their children don't want to run the business. They want to do something else. Right. And many of them are selling out because you see other companies coming to buy them out, and they land into wealth, and they want to know what to do with it and how to manage that. And the complexities of nuclear families is impacting everybody, because the earlier generation was bought on the concept of joint families. They stayed together, listened to an elder, and the elder decided that how to give the assets of the family to everybody else and make sure they're comfortable. Now they're all breaking up. All the great Indian families are broken up. And when they break up, how do they divide and what do they do is a big issue. They need advice. And also, when people plan today, they must plan on the basis that people are not going to stay together. So you must put structures into place to pass on to the next generation whatever wealth you have, where you do not assume that everybody stays together and family disputes do not hurt you in future. You've got to think ahead. The idea that everybody is going to stay in the same house, you get a big block and one floor for this, one floor for that, everybody is going to be happy, is not going to work. Sure. It's very, very rare. What a standard is now become rare. Mm-hmm. And lastly, the complexities of globalization. You could have people staying overseas, staying in other countries, doing business. You can take money out much easier now, legally. And this also causes certain structural issues regarding taxation, laws, compliance, etc. Sure. So I think we are seeing this family office segment grow tremendously in India, and I think it's going to be very, very big. But what it calls for is a great degree of expertise, understanding, ability to market, ability to understand taxation, law, and investment options, evaluate many things, and advise them and build your reputation. Sure. Because you are a fiduciary agent. As a fiduciary agent, you have a responsibility to not have conflicts of interest.
Sure.
The biggest issue in this business are two things: competence and conflicts of interest.
Completely agree.
Because you are deluged with a variety of investment options across investment classes,
Right.
which carry very differential risk. Well, the going is good and everything is going up, it looks great, but you know that economy moves in cycles, investment moves in cycles, and how do you protect people against a downturn in a cycle and do well is an expertise that you must have. And I think when you deal between two generations, the older generation will always want to protect capital. The younger generation wants to earn 100% a year, every year, and buy those yards and whatever they want to do. So you've got to learn how to have these challenges. But the thing is, the market is growing, and I think it'll be very big.
I'm sure. So do you yourself have set up a family office, or are you?
No, we don't have a formal family office because we have only two kinds of investment, one in venture and the other in just some stocks that you have, you inherited because of something else. And in venture, we have a fund called Add-in Capital, which is between Ranjan Pai and me, and that has about 30 investments. One of our first investments was Beiju. We gave $9 million and 20 million pre 5 years ago. Now that company is raising money at 5.6 billion. It's an extraordinary company, the most valuable edtech company in the world.
Right.
We have 30 investments, some in the US, and then we have investment in 10 funds where we are part GP and LPs, and those 10 funds are totally invested $450 million, and we have 280 companies, 50 in the US. We get 3,000 companies coming to all the funds, and we are just GPs, and we make sure that governance is there, and we created platforms where other people can be invited to invest. And as a family, because we started 7 years ago, and we wanted to help create an ecosystem, we have investment in 37 funds, including those 10 funds where Aaron is, and 7 or 8 of them are overseas.
Sure.
And maybe 80-90% are all in venture across different classes, different kind of asset classes. So it is very focused on technology because we understand technology.
Yeah. So on that note, so far regulators acknowledge or categorize investors on the basis of the investments, the amount that they're making. Do you think there's a case for different assessment standards or different standards to acknowledge different classes of investors on the basis of how?
No, I think the regulatory gap is that for people who have family offices and who want to formalize investment, we need to have a special category, like an AIF,
Right.
which gives them protection and which allows them to invest, especially in certain allocations like QIB and others. For example, at SEBI, I had a committee, and we have been arguing that large family offices should be termed as QIB because when overseas people come here, there could be family offices, they get certain allocation as QIBs. We don't see why Indian family funds should not be there. But those family funds had to be configured as AIFs and regulated. I think it's good to be regulated because if you're regulated, you bring in discipline.
Right.
You bring in certain reporting discipline, you bring in certain valuation discipline, and the discipline really helps you formalize your thinking.
Sure.
And if you don't do that, it becomes like a mom and pop shop without any structure. And I think when you have wealth and you want to manage the wealth, you need some structure.
Certainly. So, like a lot of our audience here are from the wealth and asset management industry. So, what has been your experience of dealing with wealth managers? Are there any pain points you faced?
No, I have no pain points except conflicts of interest.
So
I think the biggest flaw is that you should not become a distributor of certain wealth products and get a fee and also advise clients.
True.
I think there are deep conflicts of interest, and I've seen it happen to many people whom I know because we met them and spoke to them and all that. And it's a very difficult economic decision because you have to build scale to earn a living out of the fees.
True.
And if you don't distribute products because others pay you a good commission, you probably may not make a decent living. I mean, running a multi-office family office or running an independent family office costs money.
True.
And is very difficult. It takes time to build up clients. You have to market. You got to do many things. So it's very difficult, and very few succeed in it to build up scale.
Right.
And it costs money, and you have to hire good people so that, well, you get paid fees for distributing products.
Yeah.
But that doesn't pay in the long term.
True.
And that's why globally now, all the big banks who have wealth distribution are trying to go to a fee model because they used to stuff many assets to all their clients because they used to have a distribution channel inside, and things are okay if the market is booming. When the market goes down, then you do have some trouble which impacts your credibility because most families don't understand risk.
Yeah.
They all like fat returns, they want the highest returns, and they think it comes very easily. They don't understand the concept of risk, they don't understand risk-weighted returns, and they don't understand what it means to be in the long term. That's why in Europe, among the older families, the most important thing for them is wealth preservation. They want to preserve wealth, they don't want to lose their wealth. So when you talk about wealth preservation, then obviously they don't mind low yields, and they don't mind low returns, but they don't want to lose their wealth.
True.
And what they want is convenience. So you provide them concierge services and other services
Right.
which they may want in a very quiet, discreet way, like some of those big private banks used to provide to the royalty of Europe or UK maybe many decades ago.
Sure. So yesterday we had a similar summit in Delhi, and we had some prominent speakers there. And you know, like what you mentioned about Europe, focus being on wealth preservation. Here the speakers are talking about how India, from wealth preservation mindset, is now moving to wealth creation mindset. And a lot of this family is coming together. I mean, money was always like a hush-hush issue, like few decades ago in India. But today the families are coming together, following consortiums to invest together. So how do you see this trend growing?
I think it's good because we need Indian capital to come into the Indian markets. For example, in the stock markets, we have a valuation of approximately $2 trillion. About $450 million is FPI money. They are larger than the retail, I think, because the rest are promoters, are Indian institutions. And in in private equity, about $200 billion has come in. And they are very large, and almost all of them are from outside. And in venture, we got about $100 million of funds, barring maybe 5%, rest are all outside. So I think it's important for people with wealth to understand and bet on the future of India, because now venture and technology is becoming a big asset class. Sure. And they're generating great returns. For example, India has 40,000 startups, 34 unicorns. They created about $140 billion of value, and India's got $50 billion of capital into them from 2014. And we believe by 2025, India will have about 100,000 startups creating $500 billion of value. But there is a lot of clutter. You need to know what to do, how to get a piece of the cake. Okay, sure. And you got to have some kind of an expertise. And it's good to have Indian capital, because in China, 65% of the capital in venture and technology, which is the fastest growing asset class, is coming from within China. Sure. So what the Chinese have done over the last 7 years is pretty good. The Chinese family wealth market has exploded. A lot of people are coming to wealth because of increase in real estate prices, increase in savings, increase in growth, increase in valuation in the stock market for certain class of companies, entrepreneurs making it big because they become bigger businesses. So I think they're now, that wealth market is exploding, and that's growing pretty fast. And India is beginning to see that, and in the next 5-7 years, it's going to be very, very large.
Sure. So talking about family wealth, but the ecosystem is somehow on a shaky grounds. We're seeing a lot of structural changes happening in India and outside. And I know you, for one, this is one topic very, very close to your heart. So where do you see these things going? I mean,
I think let's look at data. From 1950 to 1980, India grew at 3.5% a year, and population grew at 2.5% a year, because Pandit Nehru wanted to create a socialistic paradise in India. And India was a free market economy throughout our history. And you'll be amazed at how wealthy India was. There's an academic called Utsa Patnaik in Columbia University. She has studied the drain from India by the British from, I think, 1757, after the Battle of Plassey, till now. And she says that the British took away wealth from India equal to $45 trillion in today's terms. It's an enormous amount of money. This was the Sone ki Chidiya of the olden days.
Right.
So there has been wealth in this country for a long period of time. 1980 to 1990, we grew at about 5.5%. and the population grew something like about 2.25% a year. 1991, when we opened up, till 2019, GDP has grown from 275 billion to 2.73 trillion, 8.6% a year, CAGR every single year for 28 years. That's enormous. There are not many companies that have grown in this space. And from here, we do believe that India could be a $10 trillion economy by 2030, because we could grow at 8.8% in dollar terms. And when you talk about dollar terms, obviously it depends upon internal inflation and many things else. So I think the growth in India will come because we are a country limited by supply at a price. We are actually 4 different countries. There is the top 300 million, then the next, the aspirational 300 million. The bottom 300 million will get a better quality of life, and then above them another 300 million, which hopefully will go up over a period of time. Right. But the real market is the top 300 million. And the top 300 million will continue to grow the income at maybe 8 to 10% a year for the next 10, 15 years, because they're in the heart of this growth, and it's become a self-sustaining economic group. Mm-hmm. And that will be the real wealth creators for this country. And I think that area will develop India, and that area will be buttressed by the market that exists at the bottom. For example, look at Indigo today. Why is Indigo got 50 million passengers growing at 25% a year for the next 2-3 years? Because the pricing is right, they learn how to make a money. So in a supply-constrained country, to expand the market, you need to have proper pricing. And that is coming in because Indians have learned how to do things. But for the last 5 years, the Indian ecosystem has been shocked out of its wits, because they've been used to a particular culture and an old way of doing things. We had demonetization, which shocked them. We had GST, which has shocked them. We had the IBC, which shocked a lot of people who thought they're above the law. Then we had RERA in the real estate, which has shocked everybody in real estate. And then we have this NBFC crisis. So today we have industry which just doesn't have the ability to bear any more shock. But I think out of this kind of a churn, many good companies, many people are coming up. India's business is getting formalized, much more honest. And we're going to see new shoots coming up with better management and new business groups coming up. And many groups selling out because they just can't compete. At the same time, we're going to see a technological disruption. Disruption coming because of advances in technology, electric vehicles in the vehicle area. We're seeing green energy come up in a very big way, 3D printing in manufacturing, bespoke medicine and life sciences, the cloud and AI and everything else coming together. And these are unleashing new forces of innovation in the economy, which will create new opportunities. So in all of this, we're going to see a lot of churn, a lot of shakeout, but we see a new class of people coming up who are going to be like any other global business community anywhere, very globalized, highly skilled, highly educated, and that is something that will take India forward. So I think we are in that period in the next 5-7 years, like China was about 5-7 years ago, when they had explosive growth and a great degree of opportunities.
So I completely second that, but do you think on the regulations and policies, current government's going 10 on 10, or there are some areas where they still need to pull up socks?
Well, my personal belief is the government of India does not have the capacity and capability to govern a fast-growing economy in an increasingly complex world. They're out of date, they're behind the curve, and we have to suffer. And why do you have to suffer? Because the knowledge base, the bureaucracy, the knowledge base of politicians is very different. We must remember the bottom 60% are the voters, and they decide what government will come to power in the states and the center. And the government has to cater to them, give them the necessity of life, which Prime Minister Modi has done the last 5 years. It's a very remarkable achievement what he has achieved, to give every Indian the necessities of life to create a very stable society. But are they up to speed in redefining the future, giving Indians what they need? No. Are they behind? Definitely. Will they play catch-up? They're desperately trying. So is it going to become much more erratic and much more conflict-ridden? Maybe. So what do we have to do? Now, what we have to do is to think more, to engage with government, and come out with new kind of regulations for the regulators and others, so that things become better. Now, if people like yourself and association like you don't look at the challenges you're facing and what you'll face from the regulatory side, from any other side, and go talk to regulators and ask them to improve, try to do things right, educate, create public opinion, you're going to suffer.
True.
And that's what we have to do. We did in the IT industry. From 1994, we changed so many rules, we brought in so many things, we set good practices, we led the way, we set standards, and everybody benefited. It's not that you are spending your time and energy and you can asking what are you going to get. Because if you improve the ecosystem, everybody benefits and you too benefit. If you go lobby for something that only you want, which you will benefit, you're not going to be trusted.
Sure.
So I think it's very important to have special interest group, because a democracy is a system of competitive lobbies. There's not enough for each lobby, but each lobby or each interest group thinking about what needs to be done creates a battlefield of ideas, and these ideas will permeate to general society and change society's outlook for the benefit of all. Because once you shed sunshine on very many ideas, then the best idea will come out in the open. People will write about it, people will talk about it, they will understand, and it's an educational experience for people. Now, you want your clients to be educated. You want regulators to be educated. You want government to be educated. So there has to be dissemination of good regulation, dissemination of information, benchmarking, setting up of standards for your members, ethical standards, so that you are respected in society.
Right.
For example, I'm a chartered accountant. We have a code of conduct, even though enforcement of the code by the self-regulating body, the institute, is way behind. They're not able to do that. And as such, many people get tainted by something that they do, and they're not punished. So all bodies like yours, which are professional bodies, should be a SRO, set up a code of conduct, a code of ethics, and make sure you follow. And make sure people don't follow, they pay the price. By this, you get respect in society, and the respect creates trust among regulators, among government, among your clients, and you set standards to benchmark good conduct.
Certainly. Coming back, you spoke about those 300 million people who are going to make a lot of difference, but I think the pet peeve with all of these guys is the tax structures, and I think that is one area that you've also been very, very vocal about. So what do you think are the immediate things government should be looking at on that front to make
I think we suffer from tax terrorism, and if you look at data of the last 5 years, tax disputes have doubled from around 3 lakh crores to 6.5 lakh crores. And tax collections also are doubled in the last 5 years. The challenge has been that the political establishment is not able to rein in the tax administration, who seem to go on their own spiel, primarily because they're setting very high targets. Now, if you set a high target for tax collection and drive people, they're going to terrorize you. So CBTD terrorize the tax officers, then they terrorize you, and they extort money from you in the form of taxes. I know many companies were called by the tax officer and said, I'm going to add back 500 crores, you pay 200 crores, you pay 1,000 crores advance tax. They say, why? Now, I got a target, you'll win in appeal, but I have to meet my target. They don't care. They write all kind of stuff. 80% of the disputes in the courts are against them. But this perverse behavior has to stop. And it can only stop when all of us as citizens raise a voice and tell our political leaders that this has to stop. And we have to create a culture of compliance and make it known that every Indian is not a crook. And as taxpayers, we have a right to be treated with respect.
Right.
The taxman is only to collect and not to extort. And we have to talk and we have to pass the message to everybody, because this country belongs to us and we have to make this country, and we are part of society. So I think creating public opinion, working with political leaders is very, very important. But the good news is there is a draft of a new tax law, which hopefully will be much better than the old law. I don't know whether it's going to come. It just come. And I was told by government officials that when it's put into public domain, we must all comment upon it and give suggestions. And the government says they're very serious to bring it to being. And hopefully that will improve matters.
Sure. So coming back to the investments and wealth-related topics before I open it up to the audience, you are a very, very active investor. Which are the areas, domains you're really bullish on for the next 10 years?
I'm bullish on technology. I'm bullish on technology because, like I said, we are undergoing a technology disruption. The speed of innovation, the speed of change is accelerated over the last 5-6 years. That the convergence of different kinds of technology, machines are going to have intelligence with AI, and that AI is going to come much more rapidly than we believe. And there's going to be new ways of manufacturing, new ways of distribution. And now, because of cheap data plans and the smartphone, every individual is connected, every individual is networked, and every individual has access to information. And on the internet, you can do commerce, you can get information, you can get knowledge, you can have entertainment, you can communicate, you can express your views. So it is a great democratization of information all across, and that is making every single individual very powerful. And that is the change we have not come, because we all grew up in a society where thinking was controlled by a few. So all the names of the past who told us about certain development in society are no longer given the same respect, because we all know the truth. And the truth spends on Twitter, the multiple people giving their own voices, opinion, videos, is gone basak. And this is going to create a new platform. We don't know what is going to come. And so there is technological disruption happening in every field. Let me give you some examples. Oil is going to be disrupted by the electric vehicle. 60% of oil is used for transportation, all right? And the entire oil industry is going to be disrupted by electric vehicles, going to be disrupted by fracking. By fracking, you're able to expand the areas from which you get oil. So will oil prices go back to 140? No. Will oil prices be around a range? Maybe. The probability is much higher. So if oil prices stay between 16 to 80 for the next 10 years, what happens to the Middle East? What happens to the politics of the oil exporting countries? And that's going to cause a change. The United States is now exporting 3 million barrels a day, and they're bumping out about 11.5, 12 million barrels. They're the largest oil producer. In 1971, they were the largest oil exporter. They shut up. Now they're getting oil and gas through fracking. So the oil industry is getting disrupted. That was a $6 trillion industry, has now become a $4 trillion industry. And the second big industry is the utility industry. 30% of all energy by 2030 will be alternate energy. And in the UK last year, for the first time in 200 years, not a ton of coal was burned to develop energy. And now, if 30-40% becomes alternate energy driven by wind and by solar, what happens to those big coal plants? What happens to energy? So in the US, the energy markets are a short, whereas the alternate energy markets are a long class assets. Okay? And that's going to create a time when you can have a solar panel in your house, get the sun's energy, convert into 25% into electricity, store it, plug your car, go 200 kilometers, come back, and use the car to light your house in the evening. You're off the grid. So what happened to power grids for residential areas? And in auto, the world makes 90 million vehicles, $2 trillion, right? Now, last year we had 1.5 million electric vehicles. This year we may have 2 million. By 2025, we expect to have 7 million vehicles. And maybe by 2030, maybe 60-70% of all vehicles manufactured in that year will be electric vehicles. And electrical vehicles can go up to 500,000 kilometers. There are only 20 moving parts. An IC engine has 2,000 moving parts. So what happens to repairs? What happens to insurance? What happens to fuel, gas, petrol, diesel, which is getting burnt? And when those cars become autonomous, as now they're happening in a very substantial way, what happens to taxis? What happens to drivers? Accidents come down. Now, all these are happening in front of us. India may be 10 years behind the curve, but it's happening. Then if you look at manufacturing, we are seeing additive manufacturing come where 3D printing is going to make things easier. Today, by 3D printing, you're able to get a racing car, you're able to get a rocket engine, you're able to get chocolate made, you're able to get parts of a skull, your thigh bones created, a liver is being created in Bangalore by some companies by 3D printing, and the houses are being built by 3D printing. And it means that complex engineering work can be done by 3D printing, where you go to a portal, talk to somebody in Bangalore, get the design done, press a button, and next door the machine will print out what you want. Now, what happens to supply chain created the industrial revolution? So that's going to change. And it's happening very well. In China now, if you go to Shenzhen, all the vehicles, two-wheelers are electric, the buses are electric, and that is very, very different. And India too will follow suit. And in life sciences, you got bespoke medicine by DNA, you got stem cell research, and then you got brain research, which will try to control your weak electrical impulses in your brain. As to how, when you think, you got robotic surgery. Then in the financial services field, the payment system has got disrupted. We've seen how payments go. The asset class are getting disrupted. Asset advisory by robo-financiers are coming. On the liability side too, gathering money and deposits is all open for all. 45% of trading in the US is in dark pools by algorithms. And now the ETFs are taking over, and fund managers are shrinking in America with the largest pool. And then with cloud energy, with quantum computers coming up, and with AI coming in, machines are going to get intelligent, and then you're going to have robots.
Correct.
Right? And the robots will have intelligence. They'll be able to recognize through computer vision, and they can interact almost like human beings, because all of us are creatures of patterns. And the rise of these global digital monopolies are creating a mechanism by which people like Google can control your mind. When you go and search on Google and ask for them information, Google sends you what it wants to send, not what you want to read.
Sure.
And they can manipulate your mind at the time of elections. So we've seen this kind of an unbelievable change coming. The impact of that is not known, but this change will create new opportunities. And those who are abreast, those who understand, those who are ahead will be the winners. And the great mass of people are going to have a tough time. So I'm very optimistic about change in society. So to me, investment in technology is very, very exciting, and I think high growth, because when you have disruption on the scale, capital will flow towards the areas which give the highest disruption with change, even though the revenues and others may be small, because you have a huge base on which you can ride selling short and buying long here. So I think this kind of a creative destruction that's happening in the rapid pace is creating investment opportunities.
No, great. While you're talking, I'm just wondering, it's so unfair on all of us that 45 minutes is too short for a talk like this. He has a flight to catch. So before I open it up for the audience, I have a quick question, and I like to keep it short, but I can't help but ask you this. You talked about Byju's, and there was like a pride in the voice about a small amount and becoming one of the biggest edtech companies in the world. Well, we see edtech is something not new. I mean, there have been a lot of players who have been trying to do that. So to ask you a quick question in terms of what do you think are those few factors that has led to Byju's becoming what it is today?
I think
what did they get right?
First of all, he's a fantastic entrepreneur. I think he's unbelievable, great entrepreneur, high energy, brilliant mind, and able to really teach and inspire people to do certain things, and very aggressive. So that is a plus. Second, he's focused on B2C. I believe in education, B2B is very difficult, because B2B you have to deal with academics and they don't change. The teachers don't change, and they're, difficult change. They become a pain sometime, and the schools will not pay you money. If you got a B2B business, they'll hang on and cut everything else. So selling and distribution becomes very difficult, whereas if you focus on B2C and parents, there are too many tiger moms and dads who want the children to come up, they'll invest in technology, and they got the buying power. But you got to market, you got to reach out to them. That's second. So he did B2C. And third, his pedagogy was fantastic. His pedagogy is fantastic because he came not from the academic side. If you come from the academic side, you have been stuck onto a particular model of how to teach and how to communicate, whereas he came from the learning side as a learner who wanted to achieve certain results. His mind was very different, and he came from the problem-solving side, so he could communicate and show people how to learn, and arose the natural curiosity in everybody. All of us are curious beings. We still are curious, whatever age you might be. So if you can arouse the curiosity to learn and to discover and to do things like he does, I think it worked. And lastly, he's a very smart finance guy. He knew how to raise capital, how to go market, because there are only two things in investment, fear and greed. True. And greed will always dominate when you're growing fast. And, if you're able to play on that and raise more and more money at higher valuation, you succeed. And he has done extremely well.
Sure. So I think the third factor you talked about, being from outside of education and trying to make, I think that's a great takeaway for the wealth management companies. A lot of them could really change and transform their systems by getting people coming from outside and getting a better perspective to run the same stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important that if you're an insider, you are very structured, because you see, all large companies are victims of processes. They become large, they're entrepreneurial, they grow up to a stage, then they put processes to duplicate, to manage, and they become victim. The processes dominate their thinking.
True.
That's why big companies are never innovative. Even though they can think and innovate, they have the best-in-class people, it's very difficult to get things done and outputs when you're very big. So that's why the smaller companies always an entrepreneur, they come and create and do something very, very big because they're still learning the processes. And processes are required to grow. Without process, you can't grow. It becomes very difficult.
True.
So that's why this balance between creativity and process for growth is always a challenge. And that's why the best strategy for people who are establishment is always to invest in new upstarts who have got great ideas and you don't know they may fail and they actually succeed.
True.
And you ride the wave.
Absolutely. So on that note, I'll quickly open it up. We maybe time for two to three questions max. Yeah.
I'm Sudhir Kali from Australia. Been an academic for 30 years. And my question is that, like you said, the model of education has changed with edX, with Udemy, with Coursera. What do you think will happen to the established traditional degrees that have thus far dominated the higher education scene all over the world?
Well, let me explain. Let me start with basics. Why do you go to a university? You go to a university for multiple reasons. One, you get knowledge. There is a teacher who is a PhD, hopefully, or a master's degree who read all the books, who can come and teach and explain to you. But that knowledge is available on the web for free. The best professors all give you this knowledge. What you need is a guide who teaches you how to use the knowledge, how to use all that information to solve a set of problems, right? So the need for the teaching is come down. Second, you go to university for socialization. Why? You're part of a cohort, you meet people your own age, you learn to live with them, talk to them, work together, fight together, go somewhere, fall in love, and have fun, or whatever it is. A part of growing up, because there's a time of your life when you're finding out who you are and what you want to be. And you know, your mind changes. It is very plastic at that point of time. So socialization is needed. But you need socialization for 5 years or 3 years is a moot point. The next is you need to have assessment. That somebody has assessed you to say that you are at this particular level, so that when you go out in the wide world, people know what you are. And that is very important, but that can be done outside the system. You don't need your faculty to do that. There are tests and other scores, psychometric analysis, we can do that. Then you need the brand. The brand is very important because you go to a university and the brand will open doors for you because there's a fraternity. So the brand is important. And then there's a cost. Now the cost has become so high, then you see what you need and how it has to be done. So I think the whole idea of the university and the college of the future being rethought, and the teaching will shrink, more project work will be there, flexibility will be there by online, offline, and socialization will come down, and it can be very flexible as to the time period you complete your degree or whatever it is. And then the brand is important, and the brand can be replaced by many things, and the cost has to come down because today in the US, students have got a $1.5 trillion debt. Is not worth it. In India, if you want to do a medical degree, it'll cost you 1 crore for 5 years. It's not just not worth it. You may never earn that kind of money unless you have a rich parent who pays for it. So all this, I think, is bringing about change. And from the employer's side, when you have a system where you need highly creative people, you need people with the left brain and the right brain, logic and creative thinking, because the people who follow rules are available, and the machines can do a lot more of the rule-based work in future. Remember, there are 3 kinds of jobs. One kind of job which requires the left brain and the right brain, the creative aspect, like a dancer, a software architect, a musician, which are required. And the second is rule-based, where you sit down in the office and do work which can be done by a machine and an algorithm. And the third are individual performers who provide individual services, which will remain. The middle is going to shrink. And so what employers want today is people who are creative and logical. And to do that, they try to make tests and try to test your skills. So you need to go to a situation in a university where you can have multiple options. And traditional university can't give multiple options. For example, you want to do a degree in physics with a major in dance, a minor in logic, and a major, let us say, in chemistry, or a minor in anthropology. You're not going to get the degree. So now, what is happening with Coursera and others is you'll have universities certified for certain courses. You tie with somebody like Coursera, And Coursera will allow you to go to all of them and do offline, online, and get those credits in various subjects. You collect all those credits, come together, get a minimum credit, go to Coursera, they give you a degree. And say you did this course from this university, and the cost comes down dramatically, and you can do it over 7 years instead of 3 years, and you are fine. Because what your employees want is very different thing in future compared to what they want in the past. And in the gig economy, there are multiple options available for you. So I think all these are going to come, so we're going to see a great churn. And that's why I think in the United States, people asking the question, is the cost and the degree worth the effort? Of course, they are a rich society, but in India, a degree is a signal. It's a signal that you come up. India, there's still an aspiration to come, because what happens in America can happen to a rich society where those people don't have to bother about earning a living. You got social security, you can always go do some work, so you have individual aspirations which you have to meet. But all this is going to change education in the next 10, 15 years.
Just a short follow-up. So based on what you said, why is the government still wanting 5,000 new universities?
No, because India is still emerging. You know, India's got 950 universities, 51,000 colleges, 33.5 million people in college. All right? But our gross enrollment rate is only 26%. Bihar is 13, Tamil Nadu is 46, and is going at 2.6% a year. By 2030, FICCI says, which we wrote in the report, that India will have 70 million young people in college. So India is different. America is different, Australia is different, Japan is different, India is different. So what we need in India is very different. We need in India people to go to college to get those life skills so that the next generation becomes even better. Now, but we need that because those basic things are not there. And in many countries, average standard is high. In India, average standard is low. Exceptional talent is very high. The delta between the average in India and the top is very wide. The delta there is much narrower. So the product that comes out on average is much more standardized than India. So there are other things. So what do you do with the Bihar? 13% GER. What do you do with Tamil Nadu? 46%. Will Bihar ever become Tamil Nadu? That's also India.
So thanks for your rich and wonderful insights. But I'd slightly like to disagree with the fact that you mentioned about Baiju and Coursera and what is being trying to do with the current universities. Because it's like passive watching of content and videos is very different from what is active learning. Active learning in universities can never be replaced by these videos, I feel. I feel that because it's like asking...
I'm not saying they're going to be replaced. I'm just going, said physical interaction is going to come down. You can't replace a teacher. The teacher will go from teaching to more of a mentor, more of a guide, more of a tutor. So the interactions are going to come down because they're going to teach you problem-solving skills. What does the teacher do? Teacher gives you information. Teacher does assessment, and the teacher interacts with you. The information giving will come down because of flipped classroom information available. The interaction will expand. The mentorship will expand. So the course will change.
So what is the impact of that education that is being provided by these online mediums? Is it not like asking, sending
online today is a supplement. You need offline online. Correct. It cannot be totally online because totally online is only good for certain class of people, not everybody.
Okay, thanks.
If I have to just
so what are your thoughts
to answer
on
this
China
question, because I've been into education for quite long now. 4,000 plus MBA institutes in India, and 90% of them can't provide jobs to their people. Even after charging lakhs of rupees, even after having schedules which like run from 9 to 5, 2 years in a row, but they're not able to provide. So I think online will bring, and we are facing that already in the financial education that we give out. It gives you access to the best of the best tutors. Like he's talking about, I think the teacher will become more of a mentor. And I think that's what we all realize, that the practical aspect is completely missing right now into academia, which I believe technology should be able to bring in. Yeah.
So I think it has to be flip on both the sides, whether the student should be able to reciprocate what is being learned.
True.
Thanks for your time.
So I think you have...
I will take another lady, some lady.
Okay, sure.
Some lady.
So, there. Right at the end. Himanshu, will come back to you. There's someone.
Yeah. Welcome.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
I have a very different question. So I was just thinking, as an investor, what you do is basically try to forecast changes, and then you think about how to capitalize on that, right? So I was just wondering, when you account for all these changes, what do you think about climate change and all of those fears that are looming around? How do you account for that?
Well, you are in Mumbai and certainly going to suffer from climate change. There's flooding in the street. I am from Bangalore, 1,000 meters up, slightly safer.
But as an investor, who
I
might-
know. Look. As an investor, obviously today, your time horizon for investment comes down. Okay? Time horizon, you're not going to invest for 20 years unless you buy a house or whatever it's for your own living, right? Your time horizon has come down. When the time horizon is down, your ability to assess the impact of climate change is much higher. And climate change is moved slowly.
Yes.
Even though it may take 10, 15, 20 years, and you can see, if you keep your eyes open and if you read, you can know which are the areas where it's going to be impacted.
So you
All right?
basically sidestep that by saying...
I beg your pardon?
So you sort of sidestep that by saying, I'll reduce my investment time.
No, it's not that today investment cycles are down. I mean, do you invest and keep something, invest and hold for 20 years? You don't, right? The volatility is too large. See, when disruption takes place, when rapid change takes place, volatility increases, stability comes down. Today, there is $17 trillion of government bonds in the world with zero interest rates, negative interest rates. What does this show? What does it show? It shows that volatility is so high, so much of money is going into safe assets, they're willing to be negative. They're going to get less in future than what they got today, and they're doing it because they believe if you put more money tomorrow, you're going to get even less. So please understand the psyche, okay? It's already happening in a big way. So when that happens, the horizons come down because you don't know what is going to happen, right? So I think we have to be much more careful and keep watching, but the impact will be felt over time. It's not going to be immediate in 2 months, 3 months, unless you stay in the Bahamas.
Thank you.
So what are your thoughts on China creating its own internet ecosystem, like Facebook, Google?
Well, let me tell you, hasn't America created its own internet system?
True.
America has created its own internet system. It's got Google, it's got Facebook, it's got Twitter, it's got Pinterest, and it's got something else, right? It's American. They're all headquartered in America. The data is there. The NSA snoops on it. Uncle Trump knows about it. But they conquer the world. So China has created its own. China is 20% of the world. They created their own, and they created a great firewall to keep every Chinese there, because the Chinese want to know what every single Chinese is doing. They got millions of surveillance cameras all over the place with facial recognition technology, which is such of high quality. Because of the huge amount of data, they can recognize everybody. They know exactly what you're doing. And that is exactly what the Americans also know. They don't talk about it, and you talk about China. China is shut up because they don't want to be part of the American system. We are all victims of that. So America has done it. Chinese do it. Nothing wrong. India should do it too in a very different way.
Thanks.
Because our data should be in India. It should be subject to our laws. And we should have the protection of our courts for the data. And it should not be in the US like it is today for Google and Facebook, because in that case, we can't enforce our rights. Or in the US, we are called non-resident aliens. Yeah, they call you non-resident aliens. If you're a tax payer there, they call you non-resident aliens, right? So you don't have rights to enforce in the court. So big countries are going to have data sovereignty, local storage and all that, and it's going to be interesting. It's get a own industry. Last question? Okay. Yes, madam.
Hello, sir. This is Shruti. I wanted to ask, like, how should, when you said in university people go to learn life skills, but in India, how should we create an awareness to understand that teachers are mentors who are going to guide us to use the learning which we have? Because back home, everybody thinks if you go to university, you have done the education and that is what it is.
It's a difficult task. I've tried it for 25 years and failed thoroughly. So it's going to be a very difficult task. It's going to take another 25 years. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
And it's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Can you just...
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session.